Welcome back to the podcast series of Merxin Ltd. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Professor Darragh Murnane. Professor of Pharmaceutics, but also the recent recipient of a fellowship of...
That's right, from the Royal Society. So I've just been awarded a Royal Society Industrial Fellowship to spend some time working with Merxin.
Thank you so much.
Over the next 12 months.
Yes, we're looking forward to that.
Very exciting.
Congrats.
No, it's a fantastic fellowship. It gives me the opportunity to start translating some of the academic work that we've been doing over into your industrial development process. It's a really exciting opportunity. The Royal Society Fellowships are quite a catch to get, that's for sure. But it just goes to show the strength of the work that we've been doing together over the last few years and the growth that Merxin's going through.
Looking forward to it.
Very much looking forward to it. I can't wait to be taking that train up to King's Lynn every Monday morning for the next 12 months.
So great pleasure to see you, Darragh, to join this conversation. And let me ask you straight away, tell us about your career in inhalation drug delivery, how you came to it and what are you up to these days?
I can give the very, very long story, which kind of fits with how I enjoy doing science in general. My career in science really started during my pharmacy degree. I walked in off a street and I managed to land an internship at a Max Planck Institute in Germany. I just walked in and
not quite like that. You must have had a background.
No, absolutely, just walked in.
All right.
And there happened to be a chap there who, Lutz Schomburg, he's a professor now at the Charité in Berlin. And he had happened to just come back from Harvard and absolutely loved the opportunity to have somebody that he could talk English to. So I managed to get an internship working with him in molecular biology. And that just completely blew my mind and drove me in the direction of wanting to engage in research and do research. And I always thought I was going to end up in kind of pharmacology side. But then
did you have a degree by then?
No, this was during my degree.
Oh, great.
Yeah. It was the summer after my first year of my pharmacy degree.
Wonderful.
Which is in Trinity. So I studied originally in Trinity. You might know I'm Irish.
No.
Indeed. And yeah, so after that point, then I was lucky enough to get another internship working for a company called Murnane in Holland, who, they don't exist anymore. I think it's sharing these days. And that's when I discovered how much I really enjoyed pharmaceutics. And from there, I ended up studying for a PhD with the great Chris Marriott and Gary Martin at King's. And that was in London, yeah. So that was a really wonderful time. It was great to move to London, in your early 20s with a little bit of money as a student. It's fantastic to move to London. But that was just a really great experience. Fantastic supervisors. And I think, they really did contribute a lot to the start of dry powder inhalers development in the 90s with the work out of Chelsea and then at Waterloo. We had great people around, like Ben Forbes was there starting out all of the work around tissue culture. And it was just a fantastic group to be part of. Mark Brown as well, who went off and did all the work in dermal drug delivery and started up his company MedPharm. That was all going on at the time that I started. It was just really, really exciting. So I kind of got this real experience of how science can be translated into solutions for industry. Stop thinking about everything coming from industry, from academia, telling everybody how to do everything. Actually, there's a lot of questions that can come out of industry that lead to really interesting problems to investigate scientifically. And I think I got a lot of that from working with Chris and Gary and having Ben around and like people who really were formative for my career. And then from there, I guess I moved after a brief stint as a lecturer at King's. I moved up to Hertfordshire. Mark had the chair of pharmacy up there, and he asked me to take on building up the respiratory region up there. And I guess for the last 10 years or so, 15 years, that's where I've been.
What led you to choose respiratory? Of all the topics you could have done that were buoyant at the time?
It's really interesting, actually. I think I thought I would probably end up working in oral drug delivery, and I thought I would probably end up back in industry after doing this. And when I met with Chris and Gary, I can remember walking into the office with Chris and Gary, and actually it was brilliant. There was a guy doing abseiling window cleaning outside. And I can remember at one point Chris going, "Don't be too surprised if somebody starts dropping on a rope outside the window." And there was just something about their approach, their nature, their personalities that really attracted me to doing a PhD with them. And they had this really interesting project which was around trying to produce inhaled, well, aerosols of insulin at that time, and they had a really interesting project that they were looking to use electrohydrodynamic atomization as a technique to produce particles for inhalation. There was just something really, really interesting about that topic that really set my mind racing. So some of it was the people, which I think is always really, really important in any job or position you take on. Is there a match between the personalities that are there? And there really was for us. I enjoyed, as hard work as it was, I enjoyed every minute of working with Chris and Gary over the years. It's been brilliant. Um, and I think that was it. It was kind of something really exciting. And of course, at the whole time, the industrialization of inhaled insulin was happening with, with Aradigm, with Pfizer Nectar. A lot of this was going on at the same time. It was really, really quite an interesting time to get into it. And the more I got into it, I realized it was a really nice merge of kind of my interests in the physiology, the pharmacology, and the physical chemistry in particular, how you can control physical chemistry to understand formulation behavior and use that to control the biological behavior of the medicines.
I would like to ask you a trick question. You
Uh-oh.
clearly have an extensive publication record. Um, if you were to name one or maximum three papers from your catalog, which one do you think defines your career,
Wow. I mean, well,
or the one you prefer?
I'll,
Maybe.
I'll be humble. I don't think I have a great publication record. I've got a decent publication record. Um, what would be the ones? I mean, I think I do really like the work that we've done recently on the X-ray computed tomography.
Hmm.
So the structural analysis of dry powder inhaler products. I think that's really I really enjoyed that paper. I've had some really great collaboration with my colleagues up in Manchester and in Leeds on that work, which is really, really brilliant. It's been a pleasure to do, and of course, that's helped set up my own company that does that area
Hmm.
of analysis as well, in Formix. And then there's another paper out of that, which again is related to X-ray computed tomography, which essentially we've been able to show for the first time in powder beds the molecular basis for particle-particle interaction, and that was really quite well. It's really quite cool for a nerd like me. Um, it's a very specialized X-ray computed tomography technique that had never been used for organic molecules before. So that was really quite cool. So I think they're the two, and then formative. I mean, I guess what took me there. Um, there was a paper that it's probably the paper that I enjoyed the most from my PhD thesis days, which is a long time ago now. Too long. Was one where we did something called thermokinetic analysis on micronized drugs, and we were able to examine the presence of amorphous components inside the particles, and that created this approach of trying to make engineered particles that we could use as test systems, very controlled particles, and that's something that's carried on through a lot of the projects that I've had my students do since then.
Looking back at the time since you started inhalation drug delivery in the 90s, what do you think are the defining moments in the inhalation drug delivery field that change the paradigm and the way people look at inhalation drug delivery?
Yeah, it's interesting. I will pull you up. I wasn't around in the 90s.
You said you started your first degree.
That was my first degree. Well, I certainly wasn't in respiratory in the 90s. I'm a little bit younger than you.
Oh, but look.
but less wise for that, I guess. And what would I say? So this is really interesting, right? Because I've got a PhD student at the moment who a lot of people will know, called Mark Sanders.
Yes.
Very well, who of course has made a great hobby out of the history of inhalation medicine. And I think the thing that stands out to me is the more you look at it, the less there is that's new. So we often see the same trends coming back around again and again and again. And maybe I could revisit one of your questions, one of your last questions. One of my favorite papers. It's not going to be one of my most cited papers, but it was one that I really enjoyed doing because I was a co-author with my twin brother on it.
Ah,
which was brilliant. And that came out of something that a guy called Noel Snell, who people might know, and Mark
Mhm.
did together. And what we demonstrated was the fine particle delivery from a Nelson's 19th century inhaler for the 100th anniversary of that inhaler coming around. That was pretty cool. So that's where it all starts as far as I'm concerned. So I mean, I guess since the times that I've been around, I think we all thought in the early 2000s, those of us that were keen and immature, that particle engineering was going to massively take over. And I think we probably reached a realization towards the end of the noughties that actually it's probably only really a solution for high value products
Mhm.
and high dose products. So I think understanding the places of those technologies throughout the noughties, I think that was quite important. Before my time, definitely the HFA changeover produced some paradigm shifts in how
So
we think about medicine,
CFCs to
CFCs to
HFAs.
HFAs, because that's helped us deal massively quickly now, much more quickly with the current changeover to low global warming propellants.
Mhm.
It set the framework for how we can deal with that. And I think one of the big changes that we're going through at the moment, and probably I think we are mid change, is this transition actually for respiratory therapies away from inhaled delivery towards injectable biologics.
Mhm.
And I think what's interesting is seeing that come full circle. So, of course, we had inhaled biologics in the 90s and inhaled biologics in the noughties, but we're actually starting to see that come full circle with real products that benefit specifically from local targeted delivery. So I think, yeah, three main areas, I guess, is really understanding the place of particle engineering and where that fits in inhaled product design, that full circle again for propellant switchovers, and how we could actually make devices better, and if we want to go that way, and now also understanding the place of biological therapies. And some of that has benefited from devices evolving, soft mist devices, mesh nebulizers, and things like that. um I guess that's giving us a new possibility to deliver biologics into the lung in a way that we wouldn't have had using other techniques.
Mhm. So, looking at the present, w- w- what excites you about inhalation drug delivery, and what do you hope that the future will bring?
It's a good question. I mean, what excites me about the science that I'm doing at the moment is being able to explore new techniques. Predominantly, it's the X-ray side of things that I find most fascinating at the moment. Some of the things that we can see with that, whether it's some of the work that we're doing with PMDIs, for example, and the work that we're doing on powders. So I'm quite excited about being able to take new tools into the pharmaceutical space and see what they create for us. So that's kind of a personal interest, see where that goes. In terms of what's exciting me around respiratory drug delivery, I think it's nice to see people focus on the unknown questions, these links between pharmacokinetics, deposition, solid state. There's a lot of work that's gone on, possibly stimulated a little bit by the FDA's initiatives, but a lot of that came from the industry to try and understand those links. That's quite exciting because it's kind of going back to where we were at in the 90s about really trying to understand the fundamental physical sciences and the aerosol science behind the therapies. Go back to that science to try and build back up again. And then in terms of treatments, there's a lot there are a lot of diseases that we haven't been able to manage very well that has really had a terrible impact on patients' lives. Things like fibrosis, things like arterial hypertension, things like ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome. So diseases that really do have a massive impact on patients' quality of life and shorten their lives. It's really exciting to see these new therapies coming out, either as orphan therapies or even as wider, more commercially successful. That's great in terms of us being able to do something that makes a difference to patients' lives, but it also creates challenges for people like us.
Mhm.
We've got different types of therapies that we need to deliver that needs us to think more cleverly and develop more interesting devices, such as what we can get into soft miscs. We were talking earlier on today about that.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think there are some very exciting things. I think what's exciting for me about it is that we're nowhere near meeting the challenge yet. And that's what gets people like me and you out of bed in the morning, is
Mhm.
being able to use our science to solve problems for people. And I think that's a really exciting place to be as a researcher.
Um, we hear a lot about LNPs, obviously, for inhalation drug delivery, in particular, solution formulations. What's your take on them? What's your experience?
It's really interesting. It's like for years and years and years, I think LNPs and liposomes were a technology that was waiting for a problem.
Mhm.
And I mean, I remember studying about liposomes and LNPs and lipoplexes, as they were called back then, for delivery of nucleic acids and gene therapies and things back as a student in the 90s. And yet we never really went anywhere other than Eric Alton's great work with the well, it wasn't just Eric, it was the whole team around him from that cystic fibrosis consortium did great work to develop that up. But that's kind of where it stopped. So where are we at on that? I think I do have some concerns about potential immunogenicity and toxicity of some of the lipid vectors that are coming in for repeated use. I think that's something that we haven't quite nailed yet. I'm not saying that that is a problem. Nobody stopped doing the research into it, but I think there is a concern about that we need to address. Um, I think there's also an issue with the cost benefit for some of these medicines. A lot of them are going down quite niche disease areas that I think we might struggle to create the market for. And the delivery of those is quite a challenge. You know, we've got some great academics who come along to our conferences that are really developing interesting ways of formulating them and delivering them. And I think that's quite good to see, because what we don't just want to see are more nebulized products for this. We want to have products and devices that patients can use to take them. You know, if we think about whether it's vaccination that needs, LNPs to deliver the nucleic acids, that's got to be something that can be transported around the world, delivered really easily. That's probably not going to be a nebulizer in most cases. So that creates delivery challenges for us that needs new devices. And I think, yeah, there is a place for them, but of course, I think we're in a bit of a hype bubble about how good they are and what they'll be good for. And some of it is kind of reinventing a wheel that we've been investigating for a long time, but we seem to have market traction on it at last. We've gotten through some of the tests around the toxicity that we wouldn't have done only for the pandemic. So I think there is a renaissance. There will be new products to come out of it. That means we're going to have to start thinking about delivery systems again. And that's quite an exciting place to be.
Mhm. You are obviously on the scientific board of Merxin Ltd. You've been working with us for a couple of years. Why did you accept to join the board?
I think everybody knows it's very difficult to turn out an invitation from Philippe Rogada.
Oh, thank you. Yes, of course. But apart.
The charming company, the insistence at attending fantastic places like this. Um, but no, I think it was a really interesting time for me. I think I had come through a period of doing some research with you, as you know, obviously, and other people know. You know, we'd had the joint PhD studentship together, and we'd been on the journey of trying to understand how to characterize the soft mist devices and get some of those characterization techniques. I think we'd been through that journey together. And what I really liked about your company was just this can-do attitude. It's really exciting. You know, there's no problem that isn't worth stopping and having a discussion about and trying to see where we go. And there's an energy around the people in the company. There's a can-do attitude around the people in the company that I've really quite enjoyed working with. I think there's a good match there between us. I don't annoy you too much. And I've got, you know, it's nice to work with people where there's a complementary skill set.
Mhm.
You know, I can see that I bring something that adds value. And I think seeing the opportunities that were there, particularly for the soft mist technologies, seeing the opportunities that were out there, I thought it was quite an exciting opportunity for me to really see how my science could help in industry. It's back to that crossover. Like I said at the start, I always thought I'd end up back in industry. Actually, I've come to a different decision. It's my way of thinking can work very well with people from the industry.
Certainly, yes. And we're very glad to work with you. And I know the team
You
in
don't have a
Kingsley.
choice other than to say that, do you? So
I'll say it gladly. And I also know the team in Kingsley likes to work with you. Let me finish by asking you this question. What do you think we should be watching out for in our field? Either an academic group, a therapy, a particular disease do you think is going to be addressed by our tools, or a company? What do you have on your radar?
what do I have on my radar? So in terms of kind of therapies,
Mhm.
What I have on my radar are probably what you might think of as non-drug therapies. It's therapies that we're administering to try and boost the body's own physiological systems, whether it's against, instead of using antibiotics, can we do something to boost the natural immunity against bacterial infection, for example? I think we're going to see a lot of work coming out around that because we're understanding more from metabolomics, we're understanding more from proteomics and genomics about what's going on inside that microflora in the lung. And I think we've already seen some work come out of, for example, Danny and Paul down in Sydney had done some nice work around, changing the microbiome in the lungs. So there's some interesting stuff coming out around that that's going to have a very different regulatory pathway.
Mhm.
In terms of diseases, I think we're going to start to see an uptick. I'm already seeing some of this. I think we're going to start to see an uptick in therapies to treat acute respiratory distress syndrome. We probably wouldn't have got there except for the fact that we had to treat patients with very severe ARDS during the pandemic, which has given us a knowledge base to start thinking about prepping up new drugs to use
Mm.
away from that COVID setting, things that can prevent infection coming into the lungs. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more coming out of as a consequence of that COVID immunology understanding that's going to help us develop drugs for these unmet clinical needs at the moment. And I think there are probably two areas where I think we're going to start to see something. So kind of physiologic enhancing agents that help protect against infection or boost the immune system, the immunological response, and therapies to manage ARDS.
Mhm. Excellent. Well, certainly, we'll have
Building
to,
out.
yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on it, maybe write a paper about it and see what are the trends, who's working on what. Darragh, thank you so much for joining me, and it's a great pleasure to see you and hear your views again, and look forward to the next step and the future and our next project together.
Thank you very much for the invite. It's
Thank
been
you.
good fun.